in my opinion, all guns should be unregulated completely.
Whoa, based. But that's true.
Yeah.
Anything. So, and here's what, and people always say, I don't know if you have any, I'm sure you've got a bunch of like leftoid soy suckers in your chat. Yeah, I'm talking to you, chat. So people will always ask me, oh, what's the limit? What's the limit? And I actually have a response for that. Common law nuisance. If the use of a weapon itself, like if just the use of a weapon poses a common law nuisance, it's probably regulable. So I'm talking about like, and this would have to be jurisdiction specific. So I think that, perhaps New York City could have a argument to regulate possession of hand grenades because everyone's so close to each other.
Sure.
But probably Bessemer, Alabama would not be able to do that. Maybe Bessemer, Alabama would be able to regulate possession of a tactical nuke, but maybe, the top of Alaska couldn't, right? But that's a rational and built-in limitation, right? When the use of a thing is automatically a nuisance, but there's no shoulder-fired weapon that's automatically a nuisance. Period.
Right. So a common law nuisance. What the idea behind that is that something interferes with the quiet enjoyment of someone else's property. And the interesting thing about common law nuisance is it does have a sort of timetable built into it. If you're the pre-existing owner, if you have quote unquote seniority of ownership of your property, it's much harder for you to nuisance someone else because they're approaching the nuisance. Now, if the nuisance is known and open, so like if you have hypothetically a shooting range on your property and they want to open and right, of course you do. And they want to open a sleep center next door and you're sitting there outside firing while the real estate agent is showing them around the property for their sleep center. And they come in, they buy the property, and then they go to the court to complain that, well, you're shooting, the sound from that shooting is causing them to be unable to run their business. Well, I'm sorry, you approached the nuisance. That's your fault.
Right.
But if they build a sleep center and then you build a shooting range, then you have a different question. But this is an interesting sort of standard because
there are different levels of nuisance though. So the levels I'm talking about, and I saw somebody in the chat saying, oh, the Davy Crockett is a nuisance under his definition. Not necessarily. So when you look at nuisance in terms of elements, which, the focus was on noxious emissions and vibrations, right? That's what I'm talking about. Like the question of whether a well could be considered a nuisance was on, well, is poison gas coming out of it? Right? Like that's
right. Yeah.
How far is the gas going?
Yeah. And nuisance and trespass butt heads, especially in the age of particulates now,
right?
Where we're talking about like, is a poison gas, is it a gas or is it a bundle of particulate matter?
Right.
Like, for example, like a fertilizer spray. Fertilizer spray probably falls more in line with trespass because you're putting particulates down.
Right.
Whereas gas, is sort of particulate, but also not.
It carries over a much longer distance.
Right. And you're like, your nose picks up something and something gets into your lungs, but it's not as clear. But yeah, see, that's an interesting standard because yes, if you're throwing grenades, then the next door neighbor, their house might literally rumble from some of the explosions or the blast, as if you set up like a giant rave in your yard with awesome, subwoofers or whatever.
Yeah. And bear in mind, I don't think that means that they could ban possession. It means that they could regulate use.
Right. And
that's those common law regulations are consistent with the Constitution because that was the type of stuff that was prevalent and common around the time of the founding.
Right. It goes back to that sort of libertarian principle of, are you messing with my shit? Because if you're not messing with my shit, then I'm not really allowed to care that much.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what people don't quite understand rights, and I think the best way to explain a right is, your right to swing your fist ends at the next man's nose. Yeah. Just replace.
And for me, that's a long distance.
Yeah, it's a huge problem. I the people have to stay very far away from you, but it goes the same way with firearms. Like you have the right to possess, in my opinion, the natural fundamental right to possess any weapon that could be conceivably useful in your self-defense. But I don't know if you have a right to use one that automatically would destroy a peaceful neighbor, right? So, but let me make that clear. I literally do not think that any shoulder-fired weapon, including an RPG-7, could fall in that category. Like I am arguing hardcore for the private ownership of a fully armored AMX-13 tank, and I want it delivered by drone, you know, from like whatever country France sold those to last. So
Just
yeah,
drops the tank down like it's Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah, I'll go. So it's like 15 shit coins. Yeah, boop. that's the world I want to live in.
Well, because it's an interesting. This poses a potential solution to the interesting question of, well, do you think people should be able to own a nuke? Well,
Like,
first of all,
people.
Let's get around the feasibility issue of the overwhelming majority of people having any ability to procure a nuclear weapon.
Right.
The materials and the you're talking only like the Elon Musks and Jeff Bezos of the world could actually
Possibly
develop these things on their own. But yes, they should be able to own nuclear weapons. Well, but then they could find, well, one, they're probably not going to, but two,
it wouldn't be very profitable.
Right. It'd be a horrific mistake for them.
There would be legal consequences that are hard to explain.
Yeah. But you know, the idea is that sure, you could have them, but your nuisance issue also brings up that sort of problem. If you're refining uranium on your property, like your neighbor may have a problem with that because you've got waste, you've got, you know, real potential problems with any sort of malfunction with the plant itself. So there are issues that would need to be, I feel like this is a self-regulating problem, and arguing on the extremes. It's like arguing abortion, being like, well, what if the president of the United States impregnated my daughter? Would I
Who's
then
12
right,
and she was going to die.
Yeah. Dying from cancer.
It's like, why does it always go to that extreme when people, because that's the thing. Whenever you have a conversation and you rule out the rational, you know, the rational edges, they're like, well, I got you.
Wait, would Joe Biden impregnate a 12-year-old cancer patient? Because there's no hair to sniff.
Well, it depends on what stage we're at in the treatment.
Because the chemo would make them
wait,
bald.
but maybe they're at the, you know, the last stage of treatment and start to come back. Maybe they got hair like mine.
He goes out, he's like, fuzz.
Well, that's fresh. Well, that's brand new stuff.
If he didn't do it, Hunter would, though.
Is
that illegal to say yet?
For legal reasons, this is a joke.
But for comedy reasons, it's dead serious.
Yeah, for comedy reasons, I'm 100% not joking.